All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. For all our UPSC aspirants out there, we're diving into something pretty big today.
Huge, even.
Huge is right. It's Chandrayaan-3's discovery of water ice on the moon. We've got some awesome articles from the Hindu and Indian Express to help us break it all down. So, grab your notes. This is going to be good stuff for your mains and maybe even prelims.
Definitely. You'll want to pay attention. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or questions, just leave a comment.
Now, we've talked about water on the moon before, but this time it's a little different, right?
It is. It's not just that they found water, it's where they found it. That's what's got everyone buzzing.
Okay, so previously we thought most lunar water ice was stuck in those craters at the poles, those super shadowy, hard-to-reach spots.
Exactly. Permanently shadowed, really tough terrain.
So Chandrayaan-3 is telling us something different.
It is. Data from Chandrayaan-3's ChaSTE instrument is showing us that water ice might actually exist in areas much more accessible, not just those shadowed craters.
Now, I know this might sound familiar, but just to remind everyone, why is finding water on the moon so important for space exploration?
Well, think about it. If we want to establish a long-term human presence on the moon, we can't exactly keep shipping water from Earth.
Yeah, that would be unbelievably expensive.
They're astronomically expensive, literally.
Well,
So finding a source of water right there on the moon, that changes everything.
changes the game, yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
We need water for everything. Drinking, sanitation, growing food, you name it.
It's the basis of life support.
It is. Plus, we can break water down into hydrogen and oxygen.
Oh, right. Oxygen to breathe and hydrogen for rocket fuel. So we could create resources right there on the moon instead of dragging everything from Earth.
Exactly. This discovery has massive implications for future lunar missions, making them more feasible, more sustainable, and potentially even opening the door to permanent settlements. But what's particularly interesting is the how. They're finding this water ice in these things called cold traps.
Okay, cold traps, let's break that down. What are they and how do they work?
Well, first, remember, the moon has no atmosphere.
Right, no atmosphere to regulate things.
None. So sunlight hits the surface directly, causing these really wild temperature swings. Chandrayaan-3 found sun-facing slopes reaching 82 degrees Celsius during the day. But a meter away, in the shade, it was only 59 degrees.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Right, and that's just daytime. At night, it plummets to minus 181 degrees Celsius.
So these temperature swings are creating these cold traps. How does that work? How does that actually trap water?
It's all about those shaded areas. Imagine water molecules bouncing around on the lunar surface. They hit one of these shaded slopes, which are much cooler even with the sun nearby. And they just lose energy and get trapped.
They get stuck.
Pretty much.
So over time, these shaded spots could accumulate a lot of water ice. That's amazing. But how did Chandrayaan-3 actually figure all of this out? Tell us a little bit about the ChaSTE instrument. How does it work?
So the ChaSTE instrument, it stands for Chandra's Surface Thermophysical Experiment. It's basically this incredibly sophisticated thermometer designed to measure the moon's surface temperature. But it doesn't just measure the surface, it has a probe that can go about 10 centimeters deep.
So it's digging in a little bit, seeing how the temperature changes below the surface?
Exactly. This is key for understanding how heat flows on the moon and identifying where those cold traps might be forming. And it was this super precise thermal data that revealed those temperature differences between the sunny spots and the shaded spots.
So Chase is giving us this really detailed picture of the moon's temperature, which, surprisingly, is the key to finding this water ice.
It is.
It's fascinating how these subtle temperature variations can have such a huge impact. And this isn't just a couple of isolated spots. We're talking about the potential for widespread water ice deposits, right?
Right.
This could totally change the game for exploring and even living on the moon.
It could. And it's not just the presence of water, it's how accessible it might be. These high-latitude regions where Chandrayaan-3 made the discovery are much easier to navigate than those polar craters.
Right, so landing and setting up operations would be much simpler. We're not talking about navigating those permanently shadowed areas at the poles. But before we get too far ahead, let's back up a bit.
Sure.
What about these high-latitude regions? Can you explain for our listeners who might not be lunar geography experts, what exactly are we talking about? Where are these areas located, and why are they easier to get to than the poles?
Absolutely. Okay, so when we talk about high-latitude regions on the moon, we're talking about areas that are closer to the lunar poles, but not right at the poles themselves. Like imagine drawing a circle around each pole. These regions would be inside those circles.
So kind of like a band or a ring around the poles, but not the extreme polar points.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason they're more accessible than the poles has to do with the angle of sunlight. At the poles, especially those craters that are always in shadow, they get very little direct sunlight.
Right, which makes them incredibly cold and difficult to work in.
Exactly.
And those extreme temperatures would make things incredibly challenging for any kind of mission, robotic or eventually human. But in these high-latitude regions, the sunlight isn't hitting at such an extreme angle, so those temperature swings aren't as bad.
Right, exactly. And that makes a huge difference for things like landing a spacecraft, setting up equipment, even just operating rovers or other exploration vehicles. Plus, with less extreme temperatures, there's less risk of equipment malfunctioning because of the cold or the heat.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So with Chandrayaan-3 finding this evidence of water ice in these more accessible high-latitude regions, it feels like the possibilities for lunar exploration have just blown wide open.
Yeah, it's a whole new chapter, and it's not just about finding the water ice, it's figuring out how we can actually use it.
Speaking of using it, this isn't just a win for science. It has some big economic implications as well.
Right.
We talked about water ice being a potential source of fuel. I can only imagine how valuable that would be for, say, deep space missions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So think about it this way. Right now, everything we want to send into space, every liter of water or fuel, we have to launch it from Earth.
And that's expensive.
It's really expensive. It limits how far we can go and how often we can explore.
So if we could find a way to extract water ice on the moon and turn it into rocket fuel, it'd be like a lunar gas station.
Exactly. It would totally change the game for space travel. We could use the moon as a launching pad for missions further into the solar system. That way we wouldn't have to carry all that fuel from Earth. Not only would it be cheaper, it would open up the possibility of longer, more ambitious missions.
And the economic implications go even further than just fuel. I mean, water ice could be valuable for future lunar settlements, even for commercial activities on the moon.
Exactly. We could see a whole lunar economy emerge based on extracting and using these resources. Water ice could be used for life support in habitats, for agriculture, even for manufacturing.
So we could have all this economic activity sparked by this discovery. It's like we're seeing the start of a new space race. But this time, it's about using resources, not just planting a flag.
That's a good way to put it. It's a shift in focus and one with a lot of potential. And it's not just about competition either, it's also about collaboration. Chandrayaan-3 itself is a good example.
Oh, right. Didn't India work with the European Space Agency on parts of this mission?
They did. The ESA was really important for tracking and communicating with the Vikram lander. That's the one that carried the ChaSTE instrument. This kind of international cooperation is becoming more and more common and important for space exploration.
Which makes sense when you think about it. These are huge undertakings that require expertise, technology, resources from all over the world.
Exactly. And as we push further into space and start taking on these bigger projects, like establishing a permanent presence on the moon, that collaborative spirit is only going to become more vital.
So Chandrayaan-3's success is a big deal for India's space program too, right?
Huge. It really shows how advanced their technology is and how committed they are to pushing scientific boundaries. This mission has really put India on the map as a leader in space exploration.
It's inspiring to see the progress they're making. And I think Chandrayaan-3 was done on a relatively small budget compared to some other space programs.
Yeah, it really speaks to how ingenious and efficient ISRO is. They've done amazing things by planning carefully and managing resources well.
It's a testament to their skills,
Yeah.
for sure, and a model for other space agencies to follow. You don't always need a massive budget to do ambitious things in space.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that being innovative and finding creative solutions is key.
So we've talked about the science, the economics, the geopolitical aspects of this discovery. But stepping back a bit, what do you think is the most significant takeaway from Chandrayaan-3's success? What does it tell us about where humanity is headed in space?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're moving into a new era of lunar exploration. It's not just about exploring anymore. It's about actively using the resources the moon has to offer.
And what does that mean for us back here on Earth?
It means there's a whole world of possibilities opening up. Think of the advancements in technology, the new scientific discoveries that will come from having a permanent presence on the moon. Imagine new industries, economic opportunities that could emerge as we learn to use lunar resources.
It's a future with so much potential, and Chandrayaan-3 has brought us one giant leap closer. And for our UPSC aspirants out there, all of this has huge implications for your exams. We're talking about science and technology, of course, but also international relations, economics, resource management, even ethical and legal considerations.
Absolutely. This discovery could have a massive impact, and it shows how important it is to stay on top of current events, especially in a field as dynamic as space exploration.
So to wrap up our deep dive into Chandrayaan-3's groundbreaking discovery, let's quickly go over the key takeaways for our listeners.
The main takeaway is that this discovery of water ice in these more accessible high-latitude regions, it's a game changer. It makes a long-term human presence on the moon much more realistic, and it creates amazing opportunities for scientific research, resource utilization, and exploring even further into space.
And it really highlights India's growing presence in the global space community. It's a huge accomplishment. But before we go, we always like to leave our listeners with something to think about. Now that we know it's more likely that there's accessible water on the moon, how do you think that will impact the future of space exploration and how humans relate to the cosmos? Tell us what you think in the comments.
It's a great question to consider, and I think it's one that will spark a lot of interesting conversation. The future of space exploration is wide open, and this discovery has definitely made it even more exciting and full of potential.
Well said. A big thank you to our expert for joining us today and sharing their insights.
It was my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep those brains engaged, stay curious, and do forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. We'll see you back here soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic that might just show up on your UPSC exams. Until then, happy studying. It really makes you think, you know. This one discovery could change how we see the moon. We've gone from this idea of a barren, desolate place to like a potential hub for research, resources, maybe even people living there.
It is a pretty big shift in how we think about it, and it's all because we're realizing the moon isn't as hostile as we thought. This water ice, especially if we can access it, that opens up a whole world of possibilities, stuff we couldn't have imagined just a few decades ago.
It feels like we're at the beginning of something new in space exploration. And the moon is right at the center of it all. For our UPSC aspirants listening, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Think about the potential exam questions that could come from this.
Oh, for sure. There's the space technology side of things, but also the economic and geopolitical impacts of actually using resources from the moon.
Right. Like, how will this affect international relations? What kind of laws will we need to govern how these resources are used? That's all got to be worked out. And it's definitely something that could show up on your mains papers.
No doubt. And it goes beyond just international law. There are ethical questions, too. How do we make sure these lunar resources are explored and used responsibly? How do we balance the interests of different countries, different stakeholders?
Yeah, big questions that need some serious thought in international cooperation. It shows that space exploration isn't just about the science anymore. It's about navigating these complex political, economic, and even philosophical issues.
Absolutely. It's multifaceted. You need to understand not just the science and tech, but also international relations, economics, even philosophy.
So for our UPSC aspirants, this is a reminder that your exams aren't just about memorizing facts and figures. It's about deeply understanding how all these different areas of knowledge connect and affect each other.
Exactly. You've got to connect the dots, see the trends, and develop your own informed opinions on the big challenges and opportunities facing humanity.
And Chandrayaan-3's discovery is a perfect example of all that, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
It's a testament to human ingenuity, it's pushing international collaboration, and it gives us a glimpse of a future where humanity isn't limited to Earth anymore.
It's a really inspiring moment for space exploration, full of promise for what's to come.
Well said. A huge thank you to our expert for being here and sharing their expertise. We've covered a lot of ground, from the science behind the discovery to what it means for the future of space exploration, and, of course, its relevance for our UPSC folks. Make sure you check out those articles from the Hindu and Indian Express we mentioned earlier. And as always, we want to hear from you. Leave your thoughts and questions in the comments. We love digging deeper into these conversations with all of you. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.